Welcome to Straight Outta Hull, the podcast about the Hull music scene of the 1980s and 1990s. This is more than one story. This is partly a story about music for anyone who knows where Hull is. No, it's not. Partly, possibly, it's partly a story about music, and the music of the 1980s and what it became, what it led to, and how it died. You don't need to have heard of Hull at all. If you have heard of Hull, this story will mean more to you than to the others. If you lived in Hull, or live in Hull, or want to live in Hull, you probably already know somebody else who lives there. You don't have to love music, but it is probably part of your life. In the age of streaming, it might be the backdrop to your Zoom meetings and pajama office. You might have some CDs in the loft, or, lucky you, some vinyl. This is really a story about life. About a way of living that is individual, eccentric, risky, fragile, and beautiful. It is a way of life that some people do for love, others for money, and some manage to make money while still loving it. There isn't a single reason to want to move to Hull as it was in 1980. Not a single reason to go there on holiday. Isn't it strange, then, that a man chose to live in Hull almost on a whim? Not Larkin. He had a good reason to go there. A job. This man was called Paul. A name not common now and not common in the 1960s and 1970s either. Pauls are in short supply. You have Paul McCartney and Paul Newman, of course. But single-syllable names are not much fun. They can't be shortened. Boys love nicknames, and Paul can't be made fun or funny. To be called Paul singles you out. It has the whiff of the middle class about it. In ever-decreasing circles, a popular show from the time we are talking about, Paul was the aloof, arrogant, posh twat who only Richard Breyer's wife fancies. He's intelligent and good-looking and fashionable. Paul was a Cambridge Blue, which means he was good at sport and possibly clever. Being both clever and good at sport, as you may already know, is unusual. To be called Paul on top of that is not good. To be working class and called Paul, well... The Paul we are going to be talking about motored through Hull, liked the look of it, and decided to move there with a few mates. It doesn't seem to me that it was as quick as that. I've read stuff about it being near the seaside without being a seaside town. It had to be in the north because Paul didn't fit in the south. It had to be somewhere he hadn't already lived. His family moved about a bit, so that wasn't so easy for him. So, one way or another, Paul arrived in Hull. His attitude and personality are perfect for Hull. Acerbic, reactive, working class, sarcastic, perhaps cynical too. Anarchic, definitely. Bitter before his time, with little reason, he settled into Hull very nicely. Paul sings like an angel and writes like the devil. What Hull has, and had more of then, was pubs. And back then, in a time before Wi-Fi, pubs had pool tables, darts, jukeboxes, fruit machines, and live bands. Every single pub in every street had a jam night, more or less. Within a mile of any home you could turn up with a guitar, or even without a guitar, on one nominated night of the week and sing or play or shout or heckle in front of whoever was standing around the bar. What most school kids were focused on back then was either girls or escape, or both. For a very few, the plan was to work hard at school with the express notion of getting out as painlessly as possible. But others weren't so lucky. If you weren't heading for university, there was a real risk of becoming stuck in a town where the docks had closed and there wasn't much manufacturing. Hull in the 1980s was a place to leave, not a place to arrive. Music provided an escape from the day-to-day, and if you were one of the talented few, it might even provide a physical escape. It might possibly become a job, but not the kind of job that anyone in Hull had. A job where you could dictate terms, choose your hours and see the world, all expenses paid. Get girls. Music was the university for those with the right talents. Many Hull bands made an okay living playing in Yorkshire pubs and established a local following. Back then, Hull was in Humberside rather than Yorkshire. There were some properly good bands, but even fewer, the precious souls, hit the big time. Starting with David Whitfield after the war, Hull was also a stomping ground for Mick Ronson, who later toured the world with Bowie. It was home to Roland Gift, the punk who started Fine Young Cannibals and made it in America. It was home for the university years of Everything But the Girl. It was the home of Scarlet. The band behind Sade were mainly from Hull. Joe Longthorne too. Every genre was represented. Every ear could find something to listen to out of that mob. But Paul spoke to almost all of us back then. When he formed the House Martins, we were too young to understand Caravan of Love and ignored it. Duran Duran and Dire Straits were calling me, not just Elvis. But when Happy Hour came out, boy, that song never ages. Anyone who could produce Happy Hour was our kind of band. And when the House Martins imploded all too soon, incredible though it sounds today, an even bigger band replaced it. The Beautiful South. The very name ironic. The music light and airy, providing a foundation for words which were dark and true. This was our stuff. This was Larkin with a guitar and piano. This was Hull. We're planning 6 episodes of this podcast, and we hope to get some interviews with the people mentioned. Will they talk to us? Probably. If we can find our way to the Main Brace pub on Beverley Road, someone will talk. But they might not. So we must venture out alone onto the wet, slippery cobbles of the old town. Hull is not what you think it is, and it isn't where you think it is. Remember, remember. Guy Fawkes planned his activities in the old town pubs of Hull, and that tells you all you need to know. Join us next time on Straight Outta Hull. You can follow us in any podcast app or online at outerhull.uk. Straight Outta Hull is presented by Lindsay Frost. It is written and produced by Paul Detman for WTD Audio.